Hello, and welcome to the third installment of The Path. My guest today is Jon Hallberg, a Goju-Ryu and Shorinryu practitioner. Jon started his training career with Sensei Paul Belvedelis, who is the first in the interview series. So if you want to go back and listen to that, that's available in cards up above. Jon then went on to train with Senoha Shigetoshi Sensei of the Ryusyokai, and then on with Onaga Yoshimitsu Sensei of the Shinjinbukan. He's an excellent karateka, and more importantly, he's just an amazing person. If you ever have a chance to train with Jon, I highly recommend it. Jon currently runs a dojo in Illinois, and if anybody's interested in training with him, I'm sure he's very open to being contacted. So again, those contact details are in the description box below. Without further ado, let's get right into the interview.
So good morning, Jon. Welcome to the podcast.
Morning, James. How's it going?
Pretty good.
Great. We're having Naha-like weather outside right now. It's been raining for 2 days straight, and my backyard is flooded, so the dogs are loving it. But the great thing is I know they won't have wind along with it. So, yeah, happy December.
Yeah, it's about. It's been really warm here in Okinawa. It's been about 24 on most days. Nighttime's pretty cool. Cold now. I'm 19 or something, but cold for me.
Good deal. Well, for all of your American listeners, what is that, about 70s and low 60s?
I think 24 is about 74, 75.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And I think 20 is 68 or something like that.
Okay. Not bad weather to be in Okinawa.
Yeah, and it's nice and dry and nice and sunny, so.
Cool.
Well, for listeners, Jon and I have known each other for a long time, and we know each other quite well. But for people who are just tuning in and listening to us, maybe you could give us a little bit of a background on your training history.
Sure. I've been training Okinawan Goju-Ryu for probably, well, since 1985. I was 16, or I was 1986, and I was 15 at the time. So about 32, 33 years, somewhere around there, if I'm doing the math correct, just off the top of my head. And I started with a man named Paul Belvedelis. He has been involved in Okinawan Goju-Ryu for much longer than I have. And I was very fortunate that he moved into my community and was a teacher along with my father. So they would carpool, and I learned about karate through my dad, and I used to watch Paul Sensei's children. I used to be the babysitter. That was my first job. So I was always intrigued with what he offered and what he did. And when he started a class in our town, I jumped on the opportunity. So my registration number with his dojo is 003. I grew up in Southwest Michigan, and I was living in a small town called Wayland, just south of Grand Rapids at that time. And Paul Sensei had relocated there for the opportunity to study with a gentleman named Ernest Estrada, who is under Nakazato Sensei's lineage in Kobayashi Shorinryu, and also a very accomplished Kobudo Sensei. So I was really lucky to have inroads with Estrada Sensei as well. Really took to Okinawan karate. I was kind of a geeky kid growing up, and it was very interesting to me. I liked ninjas and all that kind of thing, and I really learned a lot about what was real and kind of what was a little, Hollywood. So having the opportunity to train with Paul Sensei also introduced me to a work ethic that he applied to training and applied to just about everything he did. And he kind of embodied and exemplified the diligence necessary to really toughen your body, work through pain, work through hardship, and also work with a very busy schedule.
He's definitely a machine, that's for sure.
Yeah, I understand you'll be interviewing Paul Sensei soon too. So
yes, that's correct. Yeah.
Right. Well, I loved what he had to offer, and it was kind of a mentor to me growing up. It was very important to have that opportunity. And as his dojo grew, I grew. I took on different roles within the dojo. I sat on the dojo council. I did a lot of kids classes. And for a kid, for a teenager going through high school who doesn't have a lot of disposable income, the ability to teach in order to cover your dues was valuable. Mm. And it also, I think, made me a better student. So it taught me to be a little bit more patient. Patience is not something that comes easy to me. I want to learn as much as I can and get it right and get moving. And you can't push your expectations of yourself onto other people, especially kids. So I learned a lot through teaching and through being under his wing, and also having peers that were older than me. You know, he had students of all ages in class, and everyone worked hard, and we all went away with bruises all over our bodies as a result of the kind of training that he exemplified. And it was kind of a staged, I don't know if I'd say it was staged. It always seemed extremely intense at the time, but I'm sure from his perspective, he was pushing me right to the edge that he knew I could handle. And he did that with everybody. Everybody had a different threshold. So my early years of training were I started out in a beginning group. I thought I was somewhat advanced once I got to like green belt or brown belt. But I had so much to learn at that point in time about myself. So this was kind of an interesting personal journey, and I think it was a good mix of both Eastern and Western lessons.
My
start.
And having that inroad with Estrada Sensei too is quite fortunate, because I guess, well, his books were of a great impact on me when I was coming up, and reading about history. His interview series were just great.
Yeah. Yes, he trained with so many really important people, I think, in terms of the development of Okinawan karate in the 20th century and Kobudo in the 20th century. And he has such a great mind, and also really pushes his students as well. One of the reasons that Paul Sensei was so tough, I think, has to do with the way Estrada Sensei pushed him. And I'm sure he'll have some great stories to share with you. But Estrada Sensei, like Paul Sensei, was all about no compromise. You get out what you put in. You know, if you're not there, don't make an excuse. You weren't there. And obviously whatever else is going on in your life was more important at the time. So those were good lessons, and he obviously had some great stories to share as a result of that. And I think it prepared me for my training later in life. But training with Estrada Sensei in Okinawan Kobudo was always a fantastic experience as well. And I got to kind of mix it up with some of his students. He did a lot of Matayoshi Kobudo. Obviously, Nakazato Sensei has a lot of Kobudo influence in what he does. But it was a nice comparison with his teaching methodology and Paul Sensei's methodology. And as everyone is continuing to grow throughout that process, I did get to kind of pick out the differences between each of them. And I was very intense about Kobudo for a few years, and I got my Shodan and really didn't proceed beyond that. I still do a little bit with the Bokata that Senoha Sensei teaches, but I'm really not doing any Kobudo to any dedicated degree at this point in time.
At that point in time, did you feel that the Kobudo was a valuable supplement to your training, or did you really focus on it more than the karate? Or
yeah, I think everybody gets their thing for a while. They really, they're focused on one thing for a period of time. I started to learn how to manage my schedule with my training too, and teaching as a result of going to those classes. But I went to school down in Western Michigan University, and it was about an hour and 10-minute drive to Estrada Sensei's dojo when I was in college. And I would get up in the morning, I was in the dorms, and I would sneak down to some of the private meeting rooms. I wasn't supposed to have my weapons in the dorm room. I'd bring them down and I'd work out in the mornings. And I would only get to class with Estrada Sensei once or twice a week. So that supplemental training was really important. I think I had to make room for Kobudo, and obviously that's going to cut into your open hand training, plus studying. So it's important to have that balance, and I think cycle through. You kind of do stations throughout your year, right? What are you focusing on at different times of the year, because you can't do everything all the time. So yeah, I think it cut in, but it also enhanced. I had to alter my stances. I had to alter body positioning, and I kind of had to explore, okay, this is how you do it in Kobudo. This is how you do it when you're back in your Goju-Ryu classes. And you will go through a period where everything starts to kind of mush together. And that's a really dangerous time in your training because you're developing habits. So how do you commodify each of those different approaches? And then later on, how do you understand the why of it? Like, these are signatures of different training systems. And sometimes the reasons are arbitrary, and other times they're very well thought out. And you've got to find out why. So that was a key challenge that I don't think I was ready for at that point in time. I think later on in my training, I think that was very helpful, because I could adapt my training depending on who was in the room and who was watching. It wasn't always successful, but yeah, that's an important skill.
Well, the philosophical underpinnings of like why you would train are kind of a difficult concept when you're like 19 or 20 or
Absolutely.
It wasn't until much later that I started thinking about my own and why I did certain things and what I wanted to get out of karate and training.
Yeah.
So when was the first time that you came to Okinawa for training?
Oh, that's a good question. I came in 1994, and it was an early graduation present from my parents from college. I was finishing up a history degree, and it was in public history. So it was one of the reasons I think I was so taken by Estrada Sensei and all of his historiography and his historical exploration of karate. And we had numerous opportunities to train with Okinawan teachers who had come to Canada, to the United States, and for visits. And I really wanted to see what Okinawa was all about. And my parents helped make that a reality for me. I went just at the tail end of a visit that Paul Sensei was finishing up in Okinawa with the Meibukan. We were really dedicated to the Meibukan at that time, both Meitatsu and Meitetsu Sensei, and we would go and he was there for a visit, and it was a follow-up to some visits that both of those teachers had paid to us in previous years. So I went to train at both dojos, both very different experiences, and I got to travel with another really, who I think is an important instructor in the United States, James Thompson Sensei in Uechi-ryu. And we didn't speak a whole lot, but he made sure I got through everything. I was just in awe. You know, he was another really important karate figure that I really, if I had been myself now, I would have capitalized on that opportunity to get to know him better. But I was just real shy, but he made sure I got through and into Okinawa safe and sound and through customs and everything. And I really owe him a debt of gratitude. So, and in Okinawa, I was just so blown away by the treatment I was given. Both teachers and their students really treated me well. I got to go all over the island. I got to sightsee, and I trained every day. My feet were raw from the Hanbu Dojo, the Meibukan Hanbu Dojo. We just really mind-blowing experience for me. I got the chance to meet Yagi Mitoku Dai Sensei at the time. He was he was ill at the time, so we didn't spend a great deal of time together. I just got a quick snapshot and a short visit, but it was like the perfect trip for a young man of 23 trying to experience and understand Okinawan karate. So the first week I was there, I was with Paul Sensei and Tricia Sensei, his wife. And then the second week I was there by myself. And that was when I had the opportunity really to get to know both teachers a little bit better and their students. And At Meitetsu Sensei's dojo, they mopped the floor up with me nightly. We would do Jukumite, and it was hard hitting, no pads, and a lot of bruises. A lot, I had those stick-on packs that give you kind of like, I don't know, it's almost like Dit Dao Jiao, just to try and numb the pain and heal the bruising as quickly as possible. All over my shins, my thighs, my abs. I was just bruised head to toe. But learned so much, and I took notes every day. And then the third week, I was there with some other teachers that were in the Meibukan from Canada, and so that, obviously I was sharing time at the Hanbu Dojo with them, and they became more of the focus, and that was fine by me, because by that time I was pretty worn out, and it was nice to have folks there, not only to kind of hang around with, but also to lighten the beatings.
So after your first trip to Okinawa, you returned to the States. Did you, I guess, of course you have to start working, but were you teaching at that time at the Wayland Dojo, or?
I was doing a couple of things. I was teaching at the Wayland Dojo, and I started a small class in Kalamazoo at Western Michigan University. And I would rent out racquetball courts, and I would bring students in, and we would train there. One of the years we had access to a basement where I could teach down in the basement, and so I was doing that. And I actually had to go through and knock out there were nail holes from where they had framed in walls at one point in time. So I had to knock all these little nails that were sticking up out of the concrete floor. But I just had a handful of students, 3 or 4 at a time, to kind of help sustain my training and my teaching. And it was a good foundation because I made some friends there at Western, and later on in life, I ended up working over in the Detroit area. And some of my friends that went to college were actually from the Detroit area. So 1 or 2 of those students, one student in particular, Tom Duncan, actually came and started training with me again back in, the late 90s, early 2000s. And he brought friends. So my dojos have always been small, and I've always taught wherever I could. I would teach outside. I would teach, when I had apartment complexes, I would clear it with the landlord, and we would train in the basement. They even let me install makiwara in the basement as long as I filled the concrete holes later. And I would just mount it with a hammer drill right into the floor. But I wanted the students to know the importance of traditional Okinawan karate training. Sport karate has its place. It has a really good role. And I think anytime you get into competitive sports, there are a lot of great life lessons in that arena that you need to explore as a young person and even later. But it's a little different than real life combat. So I tried to instill the same lessons that I had learned from my teacher about hard training, diligence, show up to class even if you're sick, those kinds of things, and don't be afraid to push yourself. So we had a pretty good turnout with those students, and they had the opportunity to attend gashakus when we would get together in Canada or the US, and that was primarily the partnership was really between the Canadian dojos that you came up in and partner dojos and the ones in the US. One of the unfortunate things that always happens in a system is sometimes there are teachers who splinter off for any number of reasons. And I think you could probably speak to the reasons that Sanaha Sensei chose to establish the Ryusyokai. But when he decided to establish the Ryusyokai, Paul Sensei and a number of students recognized him as the senior student of Yagi Meitoku Dai Sensei. And I think that was a valuable time for us. Sanaha Sensei, who I didn't have the opportunity to train with when I went to Okinawa the first time, had undertaken a number of visits. At one point in time, he was the president of the Meibukan. And those visits with him were a very important formative time for the bonding of a number of teachers with him. And we realized what we had to offer. I think that's important. Every teacher has something important to offer. And, with his vast experience and his ability to operate an independent dojo in a group of very strong, hardcore students, I think we hungered for that opportunity. So when he established the Ryusyokai, I think we were all in and 100% behind him.
I think he between your first trip to Okinawa and the formation of the Ryusyokai in the 1999, you'd actually been to Okinawa a couple times.
No,
no, that was it.
no, just once, once.
So it was after the formation of the Ryusyokai that you went several times before you actually ended up moving there. Is that correct?
Correct.
Yeah,
that's correct. I went actually twice. I went in 2004 and 2005. I'd hoped to move there in 2006, but actually it wasn't until January of 2007 is when I actually moved to Okinawa. So, and a lot happened during that time period. I was obviously exploring career options, and that moved me to Pennsylvania for a while. I had met a young lady, and we were planning on getting married. That fell apart, but I ended up in the Detroit area and exploring grad school and my career there. So a lot of things were happening. We brought Senaha Sensei in 2001 to the U.S. and Canada for a Ryusyokai Gashku, and that was a very important trip as well, because he did this circuit and acquired a lot of dojos at the time. I think it was a year before. When did he come with Onaga Yoshimitsu Sensei?
I'm going to say 1996.
Okay, and I think that was a real eye-opener as well, because his approach to Onaga Sensei's approach to karate is very different from a lot of folks. And what I thought was hardcore, he really kind of stood it on its head. But those kinds of exposure for a group of US and Canadian karateka, I think, were extremely valuable and really created a hunger for what's been forgotten in Okinawan karate in terms of pre-war training versus post-war training. And I'm speaking particularly about World War II. So kind of wandering off track here, and I apologize for that. But while in the Detroit area, I still had the opportunity to attend various gashkus. I would bring Paul Sensei out. We brought Perry Campbell Sensei down, Stephen Radulovich Sensei, obviously visits from you when you came with Senaha Sensei at different times. And we would make the effort, burn the vacation time, pay the funds, pool the funds to make these things a reality without it ever really becoming a commercial enterprise. And I think that's a very important thing too, because as you start to make a commercial enterprise in order to support karate, you have the golden handcuffs of keeping the machine rolling.
You got to start making compromises on.
Yeah. So we would just take it in the pocketbook and make it happen. And I've lost a lot of money training karate, but what I've gained on the other side has been invaluable. So during that time period, I had a dojo where I was renting space under a shopping center, the Northland Shopping Center in Southfield. And we had students, both adults and teenagers, coming from all over the place. But we ran it as one group class, regardless of your age. And the class size could be anywhere between 1 and 2 students. And I think the most we ever had was 10 or 11. But it was always the get-together, the frequent get-togethers, that really fueled our interest in training, because we wanted to show we could hold our own on the dojo floor, especially when you're doing some of the Jukumites, some of the Ippon and Nihon Kumites, and the other stuff that we do. And it's a great time. It was a really great time in my life.
I think out of that dojo, you actually produced a quite good student in Matt. Is that correct? Yeah.
Yeah, so Matt Loisel is, I think he's now a Yondan.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
In the Ryusyokai, and I think he holds a Sandan in GKK. So when I moved to Okinawa, he had to find a way to sustain his training. And he looked for other Goju-Ryu schools in the area. He obviously sought the advice of Paul Sensei, and Paul said, here's some folks that I think are interesting and have something to offer. And Matt went with that, and I think he's learned and given a lot as well. But the best thing about it is it really helped kind of solidify his bond with Paul Sensei. And I think that's really important too, especially now that I'm located in Southern Illinois. These affiliations, despite the distance, you can still maintain good contact and you can still create opportunities. So yeah, that kind of second point in my training from probably, I would say, oh gosh, I'm going to say 1997, 1995 until about 2005. It's kind of like the second stage of my training where I kind of had to establish my own way. I was on my own. I had to take what I had learned, forge some student relationships, and become a better teacher. And then in 2007, I moved to Okinawa. And everything leading up to 2007, I think most of that started in 2004. And it really had a lot to do with your influence, Steve Radulovich's influence, and the various conversations that we were having. And I was bound and determined to learn tea. So that term is really kind of a popular and misused term these days. And what I thought it was at the time, I don't think it is now necessarily.
Every dojo in Okinawa uses the term differently than the way we understand it.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
it's, do you have like a sort of definition the way we sort of look at it, or?
I give 3 definitions actually. And I don't know that any of them are, I don't know if I can put it accurately because I think it's a rule of thumb more than a hardcore definition. Everyone wants to claim what that means. If you ask another dojo what irikumi means, it's going to mean something different than what it means in Onaga Sensei's dojo, for instance. But I think tea, one way to describe it, and I'm taking my cues from Dan Kogan here, who's probably the senior most student of Onaga Sensei in the Shinjinbukan.
Yeah.
He said you can look at tea as the pre-war indigenous Okinawan influences on karate, as possibly separated from the Chinese influences.
Mm-hmm.
That's one way to look at tea. Another way to look at it is an individual teacher's signature on the system. You look at Onaga no Di, or you've probably heard the term Chibana Ha, right? Ha, you could use it the same way you could use tea. It's the signature approach to their karate. What makes it their karate? Onaga Sensei is often quoted as saying, "I am Shorinryu." He's not saying Shorin, I'm the only source of Shorinryu, but I am trying to embody. Shorinryu embodies what I'm doing, something along those lines. So that term T would be his hand, Onaga no Di. And then I think I'll take my third cue from Onaga Sensei directly. He defines T as chie, wisdom. So what is karate wisdom? What is the right way to handle a situation? That might be defined as T. What is the most practical way? In both he and Sanaha Sensei use the term that karate is about not losing. I think that's an important aspect of T.
Yeah, the philosophical underpinnings of the how the techniques are formed and shaped.
Right.
Yeah.
So you talk about life lessons and ideas, and those are things that the general public can grab. And I like that aspect of T. But then trying to take that and say, okay, well, how would you really use this particular technique from a kata in a real life situation? I think the best type of self-defense training, my wife wants me to do a self-defense class at her workplace. And I'm not that excited about it really, because I think what people really need to realize is their limitations. And I'm starting to realize that now at the age of 47, and I've not been very kind to my body, so knees are having some challenges. I've got arthritis at a fairly early age, but how do I circumvent that? And how do you circumvent the fact that there's always someone bigger, there's always someone more conditioned, there's always someone stronger than you. So if you're constantly training strongman karate, which is I think something I misunderstood in my early years of training, you've got to kick through the pain, kick through those blocks, when we're doing soft blocking on kicks. And you got to realize sooner or later, there's always someone that's going to be able to take on your attack, especially as you get more advanced in age. So you better learn how to fight smart, and also how not to fight.
Yeah.
So I think that's a really important aspect of T. Fighting dirty, fighting to not lose.
Stacking the deck in your favor.
Right.
As much
I think
as
the
you
most brutal story that I ever heard. It almost sounds like the Hunger Games or something. And I think it's completely fictional, but it's kind of a way of looking at it differently. Is so you're a captive along with 9 other people, and the next day you're going to run a race. Anybody who doesn't come in first is going to be killed. So how do you train? You've got 24 hours to train. How do you train for that race? And you may have told me this story. I don't remember.
Actually, I've actually heard this story from Onaga Sensei.
Okay.
And it's you kill the other 9 guys before the race starts.
You kill them in their sleep. And nobody wants to kill anybody, but if your life is on the line, self-preservation is really important.
Yeah.
So that type of an approach really puts things into perspective in terms of how serious this is and how serious an altercation may be. It's not the guy chest bumping you in the bar. It's the person just saying, hey, what's up? And when they pass you by, they turn around and they stick a knife in your back. That type of a thing. That's the real danger. And people don't train with that in mind when they're training karate. They get in line drills and they pull into hikite, and they're observing form. They're not really thinking about the other aspects of it. And I think once you start exploring that in your training, it really changes things. How do you train a 95-pound woman in her 50s, Okinawan Goju-Ryu, and teach it in a way that's going to be effective for her?
Yeah, it's quite easy if you're a 6'5" man who's 18 years old. You'll pretty much get away with just about anything.
Yeah.
But that woman's not going to have. She's got to rely on technique almost exclusively.
Right. Well, and I think that gets into another thing that we've talked about is, why do you train? If somebody comes to me and they say, I want to get in shape, well, I'm probably not going to emphasize technique as much as activity, in stretching, flexibility, those types of things, because you want to prevent injury. And you can teach a lot about that, but I'm not a personal trainer. Everything I've picked up is through reading. I mean, people really value certificates. That's why, you've got to be a Rokudan Renshi to teach,
high blocks to kids.
Yeah, high blocks to little kids. Right. I mean, my little snowflake demands the best. Okay. Maybe a brown belt would probably suffice, and probably give that kid a lot better experience than I could, because my expectations are going to be different. I might not have time or patience to do that. And in today's lifestyle, time is at a premium, right?
So what made you examine the karate that you were doing and sort of switching your focus? Was there a certain point in time that happened, or did you just sort of gradually move into it, or?
I think I gradually moved into it, but it wasn't an organic process. It was going toward people who had a certain mindset about fighting and about karate. I don't train karate to prepare for the inevitable conflict or something along those lines. I just train it because it's really interesting to me. And I, it's an arbitrary choice to pursue this because it's unique. It's I love Okinawan culture, and I love the philosophies that I've uncovered through discussions with you, Stephen, Dan, other peers too, people like Paul Lefebvre. Gosh, in 2001, 2002, I think Paul and I spent the entire 4-day Goshiku talking about tea, and what his experiences had been. Anybody who had the opportunity really to train with Onaga Sensei once or twice, they came back with all of these amazing stories about, training for 5 or 6 hours at a time, that type of thing. And that was foreign to me. How can you really how can you keep going? Well, it wasn't, we're not standing in a shikodachi punching for 5 or 6 hours. You're doing all different kinds of things. But you can also prolong certain types of training, like standing in shiko and doing 1,000 or 2,000 punches or 2,000 kicks is, to many people, they think, wow, you really got to be tough to do that. Well, if you observe proper technique, it's a whole lot easier to do those types of things than somebody's who's just trying to muscle through it. Mm-hmm. And for some of those folks, just doing 200, doing 100 with each hand is something that most of them had a hard time getting through, and at an advanced level of training, right? People that are really hardcore.
Or they blow their hips out, or they
right.
They do something wrong to their knee, or because their technique's not quite right, or they're doing something wrong. Yeah,
it's not in line with the approach that Onaga Sensei has shared. I think it's interesting to look at what Senaha Sensei has done with his exposure to Onaga Sensei, because he's still very true to his teacher. His what Dai Sensei taught him, and his Goju-Ryu is what Dai Sensei taught him. But he's also explored some of the ideas in terms of how to kick and those types of things, how to hit the makiwara, and he's looked for how those things apply to Goju-Ryu. And I think Onaga Sensei too, when he looks at me doing a kata, for instance, or a Goju-Ryu practitioner doing a kata, he tries to devise ways to be helpful, to add a layer of I think, application to what we're doing without polluting the style. And I think that's very valuable.
He always uses that analogy of adding a little bit of salt to the broth.
Right. That's important. And I think I got that from Estrada Sensei back in the early days when I trained with him. We didn't always just do Kobudo. There were times when he would visit our dojo, and because he has a background in Goju-Ryu as well. I think it's a Taguchi style Goju-Ryu. You'll have to ask him. I hope you'll get an interview with him.
I would like to, yeah.
That, it's really important to remember where you came from, remember where you started. And now when I train, I do try and commodify. And if I'm training my Goju-Ryu kata, I'm trying to do them as true to what Senaha Sensei expects as I can. When I'm doing Shorinryu kata, and I have learned just about all the kata in their system, I do it the way I believe Onaga Sensei taught me, and I have taken copious notes. I've probably got 10 inches thick of karate notes, and it's all in digital format now. I stopped printing them off, but there's so much there. And my goal was, when I lived in Okinawa, to get a lifetime worth of training. I think every student that goes to Okinawa wants to talk about their experience and their how bad and how hard they had it. And that's one thing that I think is very common and uniform. I think the difference is how many hours were you training? My classes at Senaha Sensei's were usually an hour and a half long. My classes at Onaga Sensei's were 4 to 5 hours long. Mm-hmm. And that was 3 nights a week. The first year there, I could train about 20 hours a week, and I was fine because I wasn't working. I was doing some tutoring, and I was doing after school teaching at Jukus and Eikaiwas. And so I was really getting maybe 8 hours of work a week. So I had time to train and time to sleep and heal. Didn't have any money, so what else are you going to do? You're going to train. And then by the second year, I had gotten a full-time job.
So, like, just so people know, like, how long did you actually live in Okinawa?
3.5 years.
Okay.
3.5 years by design. If you look at repatriation shock, you're going to come home from Okinawa and you're going to tell everybody what a great experience it was and how it's the best place on earth, and they're going to probably tolerate that for about 2 or 3 minutes, but otherwise they're like, this person has become a very one-dimensional person as a result of their exposure, and you'll never recapture the magic. So they say really 3 years is probably the cutoff you should have. I lasted 3.5, partially because I was waiting for my unemployment to pay out. And here's how I look at unemployment. I think it's an important and valuable tool for you to help get yourself a job. And in Japan, you pay into the system. You match your employer's contribution. And I wanted my money back.
Yeah.
And my employer was Tomigusuku Board of Education. They were very helpful in ensuring that we had a mutual agreement that my services were no longer needed, and so they aided in qualifying me for unemployment while I did a job search. And I work in economic development, so trying to find that kind of a job is a little bit of a challenge. I didn't see any reason at that point in time to cut ties with Japan. And I could also try and teach private lessons, 1 hour lessons here and there. Plus, I was wrapping up a lot of things. It's quite a transition to move your life back to the United States after being overseas for 3.5 years. So I'm glad I left when I did. I think it was really important. There were a lot of demands placed on me when I was in Japan by my teachers. You're going to translate this book. Well, I can't read and write fluent Japanese. How do you expect this to happen? By the way, we'll help you. Some of the other students will help you, and we did some of that. I did 2 of Onaga Sensei's 3 books. I did the translations for those, partially with the assistance of the teachers that I worked with. And even after I was no longer employed there, a lot of the teachers at the junior high school were helping me with some of that, and that was a valuable experience as well. Learning the language, and you've helped me with a lot of that too.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think living there longer, you get tempted to become a lifer. And I wasn't ready to make that sacrifice. I had a master's degree. I had other things I wanted to pursue at home. My mother was ill at the time, so I really wanted to be with her. And so there were a number of reasons that I came back. But it was also time to see where I was going to take my karate. You could be a lifelong student at the dojo and do that, but did I want to become a teacher? What did I want to do with my karate? So, and it was the right choice. There were times when I didn't feel that way, but now, after having been back for 8 years, I realize it was the right choice. My life has changed in many ways, and our lives have chapters. And right now, I think I'm in a chapter where karate is still a very important thing in my life, but I'm not willing to train or teach a combination of 15 to 20 hours a week. So it's like 6 to 8 hours a week. And I think there again, fits and starts, right? There are times when you can give that kind of time, but it's not even good for your body to go at that level of intensity for extended periods of time. Professional athletes don't do that. There are 3-month periods where they're in maintenance mode or recovery mode.
Off season.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
So I think you got to be mindful of that and still pay attention to your training. But I think if you're going to train for the rest of your life, you've got to find ways to preserve your body as well. Some of the things that we do are not necessarily kind to our joints. So, whether that's broken bones from training with partners and in competitions, or bad tamashiwara, to just the overall wear and tear that occurs on your shoulders and your knees and your hips and your spine through training. You can't sustain those low stances forever and be moving in those low stances. I want to be kind of careful and not use a whole lot of jargon or in-class words, but our shikodachi, for instance, is quite low and quite narrow in the Shinjinbukan, and you're expected to move in that. So that height that you maintain, whether you're kicking You don't rise up. You're stuck down low. You know, I don't know if I'll be able to do that when I'm 55. We'll have to see. I might have to be standing higher, but I've been through it.
So I was kind of interested in your, you do like Goju-Ryu and you do Shorinryu. And I was kind of interested in your recommendations to people who are thinking about cross-training or branching out into something else. Do you have any sort of advice for people who are thinking about doing this?
Yeah.
Something similar?
Well, I think you got to go with your heart first, and I think you can't be afraid to. A lot of people view karate as a religion in many ways, and the god becomes the head of your system or your immediate teacher. And you know, I guess I'm a bit of a heretic in some ways. One of the benefits, and I don't think most Westerners can get their head wrapped around this, but being in Japan, many Asian cultures, Chinese and Japanese, they're comfortable with multiple right answers. They're comfortable with what we would see as ambiguity. So I think there are probably times when I've crossed the line and been disloyal to my teachers. But this is my journey, right? And how I train and how I teach are two different things also. I have a green belt right now that I'm training, and he's getting all Goju-Ryu kata. He's getting a taste of Makiwara now, and I'm trying to apply anything that I've learned from the Shinjinbukan to Goju-Ryu principles. What happens, and I've alluded to this before, is as you start to train in two systems, Kobudo and Goju-Ryu, for instance, things start to mush together. How are you doing your Zenkutsudashi? How are you doing your Neko Ashidachi? How are you holding your hands, your arms up in a kamae? And then they start to redivide when you can sort. So different teachers, even in Sinoha Sensei's Hanbu Dojo, if Tamaki Sensei is running the class, there are certain things that are his signature. I try to do it his way. And if I can remember and adapt on the spot, I think that's a really important social tool and learning tool, because my goal is to learn as much as I possibly can and get at the why of things. So I think that's when you need to really kind of develop your understanding of which principle do you apply in which context. You know, doing the Goju Kamae where your elbow is in quite deep is really great for outside pressure, and it's really horrible for inside pressure. So this is a great way to sustain an armbar from your opponent. Mm-hmm. But that's taken into a different context. And so when people say, well, that's a Goju-Ryu Kamae, well, that's a Kamae that's to be used in a specific, that position is to be applied when leverage demands it. But there are other times when you shouldn't use it. Yeah. And I don't think that's a style. That's where people get into the religion of their style. You know, Goju-Ryu Hikite is really high, Shorinryu Hikite is at your belt. Well, maybe one is to execute a rising strike and one is to execute a strike that drives down and inward. Those are the types of
not
things.
Not a fan of Hikite either.
No, exactly.
Yeah.
But, you know, when is it used, right? So it's used for training. It's used to develop your form for striking, for punching, tsuki. Those are the types of things that, here again, it's how you apply it. And you shouldn't get too religious about your style. But your relationships with your teacher, I really try to be observant of that and maintain my loyalty. I have refused rank in the Shinjinbukan. I'm the only Shinjinbukai member, which is Shinjinbukai members are both candidates for their system, and they're also other stylists who just want to research. And I think I'm probably the only Shinjinbukai member with a Shidoin Menkyo from Onaga Sensei.
I believe that's the case. Last I heard, that was the case, I think.
Right. I've really been difficult for Onaga Sensei in that regard. He's like, well, you know, you won't accept rank, so I'll clear it with Sinoha Sensei and give you this, but you better start teaching. So, Okay. But I don't really want to get in the hierarchy game and who's ahead of who, and just put me at the end and let me train, and let me mix it up with everybody. That's fun to me. And this is all at the end about making friends, learning from each other, working out hard, and keeping
Destroying your body. Oh, no, sorry.
Pardon?
Destroying your body.
Yeah, destroying your body. No, keeping the relationships alive and learning more, and not forgetting it, because this is something that's going to die eventually. I mean, when Onaga Sensei eventually dies, that's a huge loss. And we've seen other people. I mean, Michiko Sensei doesn't train or teach anymore, and hasn't for a number of years. So everybody is always commenting on these videos of Michiko Sensei. Well, what can you do? Don't worry about what she can do. Don't worry about what Onaga Sensei can do. What can you do? Not what can you teach, what can you do? Because I think that makes a difference in how you teach it. Paul Sensei has always said, you've got to feel the hands of the master or the teacher. You've got to, see and feel what they do, whether it's to you or just guiding you in your position. Because a lot of people who understand it up here, they just, that's half of the story. Your head might be 10 years ahead of your body. So don't get started now, you'll never be there.
It's like being a music theorist and not being able to play a song.
Right, exactly. So, I can't think of other analogies, but I think that's a really important aspect to training is you've got to do your time, you've got to do your reps, and you've got to always be thinking about how do I get myself ahead, because your life is very short. I probably know too much karate. I know too many kata, that's for sure. But some people, that's what they're looking for. They're collectors. And was it you or Steve Radulovich that talked? It was Steve. He talked about the pile of bricks, right? I have a smaller pile of bricks than a lot of people out there, but hopefully I know how to build something with it. And if you approach your martial arts that way, I think it's safe to explore other systems, but you can eventually cherry pick, and you get so broad and you have a very shallow lake.
My friend Ulf from Sweden, he says 5 kata is training, 15 kata is a hobby.
Mm-hmm.
So
I like that.
Yeah, I quite like it too.
So,
what's your training sort of look like now, like your personal training?
not what I'd like. I get up at 5:30 in the morning and I train downstairs for about an hour. And both my wife and stepdaughter are very heavy sleepers, so I can hit Makiwara and they don't hear it. It doesn't bother them. So I'll get an hour in, and then I'm teaching a class right now on Tuesday and Thursday nights, and just 1 or 2 students. I teach in my basement.
So if somebody was interested in training with you and lived around you, would you be open to someone contacting you, or?
I'd be interested. I'm fine with guest instructing at other schools. I'm not really territorial. I mean, my main concern is if I share something or show something, I don't want to see it on somebody else's commercial video someday. Mm-hmm. That kind of a thing where they're profiteering off of it. My whole goal is to establish relationships and create training partners that do what I do so we can work out together. And so I'd be open to training at other dojos. I'm open to having students come. If we get enough students, we're probably going to have to start putting dues together to pay for space. But here again, I make pretty good money doing what I do. So I'm not looking for a second career. I'm just looking to not lose money for the privilege of sharing what I teach.
Yeah. Right. So is there any way people can get a hold of you?
Sure. Absolutely.
Do you have a website or?
I've got a website. Yeah. It's www.okinawankarate-il.org.
I'll put a link to it in the description or with the when we publish this.
Right. And that has my phone number and email address and all of that on it. And I'll give you some other things, my YouTube channel and stuff like that. It's got a couple of videos, but I don't really make time to be kind of a cyber dojo where you've got all kinds of videos and great things up for people to see. There are some tools that I share, but I find that people tend to use that as a crutch, and so they'll train from videos instead of coming in and training. And you got to come in and put time in together, because your two-person stuff, that's the biggest thing that suffers from training alone. And I'm a good example of that. It helps my Makiwara. I don't have distractions, but you need two-person. You really need that. So.
Organizing two people to meet is almost impossible in this day and age. So like any chance you can take to do some partner stuff, I would recommend doing.
Yeah. No, I understand the need for online resources, but here again, it becomes a crutch, and it also becomes a great opportunity for others to steal your ideas. So if you want my ideas, make them yours. Once they're yours, you can do whatever you want with them. Because I got them from someone. So.
Well, I guess we're coming up on an hour here, so I guess I'll let you go. And thank you for being on the podcast.
Well, it's my pleasure, James. It's good to see you again, and excited to see where some of these other interviews lead and what the discussions are. Maybe let's do a recap sometime and talk about some other direct questions and ideas.
Yeah, we can get into more detail and about just about anything, really, history or technique or philosophy. Okay.
That's great.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks a lot. Have a great day.
You too.
Bye-bye.